And we're now broadcasting.
I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes. I've got people joining as we speak, so we don't want to stop. We don't want to start before we've got a good number with us.
These are always really well attended. It's fantastic. Hundreds of people. It's always good BECTU.
Hopefully.
I'm just going to leave and watch the live stream.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, so it's sort of gone a little bit quiet, so maybe we'll make a start because I know Tracy's got other things on this morning. So welcome everybody. My name is Philippa Childs. I'm the head of BECTU, and I'm really pleased that you've joined us today for this webinar. As you'll probably be aware, we've had many webinars during the period of lockdown, and this is just the latest in that series, but we thought it was really important to have this particular webinar around about now because, as you will know, in the creative industries there are many thousands of people who found themselves without financial support during this period. That's for, you know, largely because of the engagement arrangements in film and TV and theatre, but it has been a desperate time for our members. So you'll also know, those of you who are members, that we have spent a lot of time during this period, a lot of time and energy trying to lobby the government and explain about the various groups that had been excluded from either the self-employed income support scheme or the job retention scheme. And we did briefings for government, but also for MPs and so on, trying to explain what the issues were and trying to also provide solutions, to be quite honest. And I think we came up with some good solutions, and we had discussions with our General Secretary, Prospect General Secretary Mike Clancy, was part of a TUC delegation that met Rishi Sunak on a couple of occasions, and we wrote to him and provided solutions, and we had some meetings with Treasury officials where we talked through the solutions, what we thought the potential solutions might be. And I think ultimately the message that we got was that, I mean, you've all heard it, the government have done an awful lot to support the vast majority of people, but there definitely was a point at which, particularly for limited companies who were excluded from the self-employment income support scheme because of the dividends issue, that they were quite seriously looking at our solutions and thinking about whether or not they were workable. And ultimately, I think they concluded, and it seems to be an issue around, or they argued that it was an issue around fraud, they concluded that they weren't going to do it. So, you know, the huge disappointment for us, huge disappointment that they didn't recognise those who were PAYE freelancers who fell through the gaps. They wouldn't recognise new starters. They wouldn't do anything about people who had a balance of self-employment and PAYE employment. So it really has been a desperate time, and you know, we haven't, none of us on this call have given up on that argument, because we recognise it's fundamentally unfair that people who have paid their taxes have had absolutely no support during this period. So I guess, you know, it's been really exciting that recently the all party parliamentary group has been set up, and Excluded UK, who are with us today, have done huge amounts of work lobbying. I mean, absolutely brilliant work. I don't know where you've all got your energy from, but also Forgotten PAYE, the BBC PAYE freelancer group as well. There have been so many people trying to highlight this issue and trying to get something done, for which, you know, I have great admiration. But I think today is quite important. We're going into parliamentary recess, as you will all know. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for us to hear from Excluded UK, hear from Tracy and Jamie, who are on the APPG, about you know, their ideas for next steps, and what we can all perhaps do together to continue to put pressure on the government for people who have been just so unfairly treated during this period. So I'm going to ask Tracy to talk first, not least because she's got to go off and has a meeting elsewhere later on. So Tracy, would you like to, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's always fantastic to be on two Zooms because I know they're really well attended, and lots of campaigners come on these calls. Firstly, before I start, can I thank Exclude UK and Jamie Stone for setting up the APPG. It was in response to an overwhelming cry of pain and anguish from so many freelancers, self-employed, that they really did feel abandoned by government. And there's always strength in numbers, so the fact that we could get together was great. Last week there was a petition of hundreds of thousands had signed the petition that was delivered to number 10 and by Excluded UK, and Martin Lewis, the money expert, was also there to add a little bit of glamour. But also to you know, make the point that the Treasury Select Committee, you know, everywhere we look, people are saying it is not a myth. There are hundreds of thousands of people around the country who've paid their taxes, who have been left out of any scheme. And certainly on our Excluded APPG Zoom yesterday, we heard two very moving accounts of working people who've just been absolutely abandoned with not a penny. And my concern is the impact, and we heard it from their testimonies, the impact on mental health, the impact on debt, rising debt, and also the sense that you know, the government isn't listening. Certainly I've asked Rishi Sunak directly about particularly those who were excluded from any support who were earning over 50,000, and his response was that probably if they're declaring 50,000, probably earning 200,000, trying to make the point that actually that those sorts of salaries are very rare in the creative industries. I'm the shadow minister for the cultural industries. Those sorts of salaries are super rare. It's probably £52,000. Also, we were encouraged, freelancers were encouraged to become limited companies, so they're more likely to be employed, and then they're paying the price at. Or somebody that can't prove, because they're a musician and they gig at night, or they're a teacher in the day, they can't prove that over 50% of their income is self-employment. Or new starters, new drama students coming out of drama school, just getting going, or changed job just at the wrong time. There are so many out there who are really, really struggling. And certainly the daily count of how many days without any money at all is very moving. And whilst the government said they put in, for the 5% that are missing out, they've put in other support, like changing the minimum income floor, support for renters, and support for people who are paying for universal credit. There are still problems if you've got sums of money saved for your pension or for your tax bill. This could actually work against you when you're applying. And we know that universal credit, whilst is very welcome, is a small amount of money, and when you are living to a particular standard, it's going to impact, even if you're on universal credit, it's going to impact on your lifestyle and your choices. So we are at a crisis, and Excluded UK have we draft letter that we are looking at, and hopefully that will go in on Friday, to ask Rishi Sunak to speak to us, because I think what was really moving and powerful is those testimonies. I'm hoping that Rishi Sunak will agree to a meeting with Excluded UK and maybe some MPs to discuss this in more detail, to make the case that whilst he says not everybody will be supported, it seems that those people that are missing out are just completely abandoned. It's not even as if there is a safety net for them of any sort. So it's an important time. I'm very worried that we're going into recess, so the government can just, you know, say, well, Parliament isn't sitting, so we'll look at it again in September. Well, in September, October, we're going to see a whole new raft of redundancies and unemployment adding to the problem. So I'm going to encourage the government to keep their eye on the ball here. I'm not going to take up any more time. I know that there are lots of people who like to speak, but I just want to say, you know, we're here, we're in your corner, and do join Excluded UK if you know that they have a voice for you. Thank you so much for joining today, and thank you for BECTU for inviting me.
Thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate that. Before we move on to talk to Sonali, I'm just going to mention that if you've got a question, please put it in the Q&A at the bottom. But I'm now going to turn to Sonali. Before I do, thank you so much, Tracy, for your time, but not only that, but for your support for the creative industries throughout this really tough time. It's really appreciated, and you've been a great, as I've said many times before, you've been a great friend to BECTU and you know, all of the unions in the creative sector. So thank you very much. Sonali, would you like to talk a little bit about Excluded UK, how you came about, and you know, what you've been up to, and just to repeat, you know, the effort, the amount of lobbying that you've been doing during this period is, you know, I take my hat off. It's been absolutely brilliant and admirable. So please pass on my appreciation and admiration for all those involved.
Sure. Well, thanks, Philippa, for inviting me. I am myself part of the creative industries. I'm a limited company and also a freelancer, so I was very much affected, and I also work with a team of around 200 plus freelancers. So from the very beginning, for me personally, I was affected in different ways, and I was very much of the opinion that we had to talk about these issues on a much broader scale. It wasn't, for me, it wasn't just about my very own circumstances. I was seeing the scale of it in a much broader sense. So I came together with two other small business owners, actually, I should just sort of mention a little bit more about what I do, actually. I run a film festival, and I'm also a film distributor. And I also provide access services to the film industry, so that's subtitles, audio description, and translation. So I'm very much rooted in all the issues that are affecting the creative industries. So I came together with two other small business owners who were also affected, all of us affected in slightly different ways, all of us from different industries, but all of us very much aware of the scale of the issue. We set about initially looking at the data. So we formed as a community interest company. This was around about early May, and we looked at all the data. We did a huge amount of data analysis. We put together a team that is ever growing. I think we're around 35 people now, but 4 of us in the core team. And we established from the data that is available and from what we can analyse, that's from ONS, from HMRC, and from the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, that we're, broadly speaking, talking in the region of 3 million people who are excluded, of which in the region of 2 million who are self-employed. From there, we talked about what could we do as an organisation. We're not essentially a campaign group, but what we want to do is really amplify the voices of all of those excluded. So we've identified as many categories of excluded as we can. There are so many categories and so many subcategories, and we really want to be an inclusive platform for everyone who is excluded. We want to be a form of support mechanism, and by that I mean you know, we set up a Facebook group. We're now about 16,500 members, I think, and we've got about 11,500 on Twitter. But within the Facebook group, that's essentially the basis, the foundations of the organisation. We're a very friendly, inclusive, but also a private group. And it's a way of people sharing their stories, gaining support from being able to talk to others, and also for us to signpost members to any relevant information that there might be. As both Philippa and Tracy have mentioned, a huge part of our work is centred around lobbying MPs. And that was something that I had started out doing right from the very beginning, just as an individual. And all of that work that we've done collectively has led to the formation of the Excluded UK APPG. I'll let Jamie come on to that in a short while. But in essence, what we really want to do is advocate for the 3 million who are excluded and work towards bringing about change. So on one hand, that's on the political front. On the other hand, that's raising awareness. We've done a lot of work around creating exposure through the press and media. We also seek to work very collaboratively, so we're talking to all manner of industry bodies across many different industries and professions, BECTU being one of them, and myself being a BECTU member already. Ultimately, I mean, I know that we're facing a real uphill struggle here, and we're constantly faced with the same responses from the Chancellor, the same responses from government, that people may not have been helped in the way they would have liked. The government, the Chancellor, when challenged, frequently talk about who has been helped, rather than the 3 million of us, the many hundreds of thousands across the country who haven't been helped. And what we would say is we haven't been helped in a meaningful way. It's not meaningful support, because there are the stock responses, that there are deferrals, the options of loans. To us, these are not solutions, and they're not solving the issue. The issue is parity. The issue is that the support schemes that were brought into place, that have been implemented, are just unfair and unjust, because they've created these exclusions that have proved to be huge. They're chasms, and so many people across every walk of life, right across society, across so many industries, have been affected. Talking about the creative industries, from the research that we've done, from our own group, we've got around 30% of our members who fall into the creative industries. So a huge number of people who, like myself, in the film industry, in TV, in theatre, the arts. It is the largest grouping that we've identified within our own members. So the creative industries is really an extremely important area that is very much at the heart of what we're doing, alongside, of course, looking at all the other industries and professions affected. Beyond all of this, we are looking longer term, because we know that the solutions may not come. As much as we have sought to present workable solutions, and that is coming through the APPG. But beyond that, like I say, it is an uphill struggle. And what we really want to do beyond that is do whatever we can as an organisation to help build resilience as well. So we've set up a business directory, seeking to connect members to each other, whereby whether support comes or not, there's a friendly network there for people to engage in now and beyond. And really just to help people from a kind of support perspective, that we're there to listen, we're there to signpost to any relevant information, and to keep bringing the attention of so many harrowing stories in front of MPs, and to raise that broader awareness. And that's really essentially what we're trying to do. And over the summer, whilst we go into recess, it's about keeping up the momentum. So we have started a series of Q&As with MPs. Jamie Stone was our very first guest, and it was on the back of that the APPG was formed very quickly. But we've had one since then with Dave Dugan, MP, who's of the SNP, and has also been extremely supportive. Next week we have a Q&A with Ian Byrne MP from Labour, and we have a few more lined up over the summer. And for our members, it's just a really good opportunity for people to engage with MPs, to understand a little bit more about how things work within Parliament and what the possibilities could be. So that's really what we're doing at Excluded UK, and you're very welcome to come and join us. Find us on our Facebook group and Twitter. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sonali. Sorry, having trouble unmuting myself there. Thanks, Sonali. And it's really good to hear that one of the things that you're talking about is building resilience, because I'm sure you felt this, even I felt this, that the last few months have been such a roller coaster of, hope, and then hope being dashed, and then new hope, and then that being dashed. So I can only, I can't begin to imagine what people have been through during this period. Before I introduce Jamie, then just a reminder that if you've got any questions to put them in the bottom. And also what perhaps I'll come back to with both Jamie and Sonali is at the end is what more can we do? What more can BECTU do? What can we bring that will help you in your campaign? Not least because obviously there are thousands, as you said, there are thousands of our members who are impacted. And while some of them might be just starting to, begin to go back to work, our surveys tell us that it's going to be a very slow process, and that it's going to be a long time before people are earning enough money to sustain them going forward. So, but now I'll give the floor to Jamie Stone. Jamie, you're most welcome. It's lovely to see you, and from us also, thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing around the APPG.
Thank you very much, Philippa. And can I just say to BECTU, it's very kind of you to invite me along today. I really appreciate it. And also, thank you, Sonali, who as ever has given a really good summary of what Excluded UK is all about. Perhaps it's helpful if I try and describe how I came to be involved. I mean, my own background is amateur creative industries, but as some people know, I've played the panto dame, I've done amateur operatics and stuff. So amateur stage I know about, but that of course gives you a feel on professional creative industries. And just in passing, I would say that in recent years we've seen a UK hallmark for creative industries, which is really a hallmark of absolute quality in world terms. But it was during lockdown, talking to constituents way up here in the North Highlands, who were some of them involved in creative industries, and you suddenly, almost like a bolt of lightning, think, my God, you're in real trouble. This is such bad news. So I again got onto a number of cases to help myself. But then, of course, we had the meeting with you, Sonali, and that was fantastic. And what I wanted to say about the APPG is that I've written a newspaper piece for one of the John and Grote Journal in the far north of Scotland, where I compare it a bit like to I know there are problems with Fantasia as a movie because of an aspect to it, but when Mickey Mouse does the Sorcerer's Apprentice bit, I felt a bit like that, because the APPG grew at a rate that I didn't even dare hope it could. And as of yesterday, Sarah can get me right, we have 242 MPs signed up to it. That's 30%, 37% of the whole House of Commons. And it's right across all the parties. And that is immensely encouraging. And someone like Tracy Brabin, who you heard from earlier, from the Labour Party, she's an she was in Coronation Street, she's a professional herself. But people like that joining up and lending their voices is so encouraging. Now, what we're in the process of doing right now is that as I talk to you all on my iPad, I see flicking across the top of the screen incoming emails from MPs saying, yep, okay, the letter's fine. This is the letter to which Tracy referred, which has been drawn up by Excluded UK, and it's a list of things for Rishi to get on with. And we've tweaked it slightly from our end, but right now it's doing the rounds with the MPs to say, okay, you just sign up this. Maybe Sarah, can I just ask quickly at this point, do we know how many agreed MPs we've got? Don't know if Sarah heard that. Maybe not. Anyway, the number's growing. But what I want to make is two really important points. The first one is that I think it's absolutely crucial that we get a face-to-face meeting with the Chancellor. And I think when you've got as many MPs as 242 signed up to the APPG, and when you've got the excellent work being done by Excluded UK, then we should be able to push that one. But the point is that from the meeting, we have to try and get results. There's a wealth of difference between a lot of background noise and actually achieving something. So what I'm desperately anxious is to get actual moves from the Treasury And to help us on this, as has been touched on before, we have the Treasury Select Committee report, which is very, very helpful indeed. But they need to have their points answered by the Treasury. The Treasury Select Committee, just to point out to BECTU members, is a committee of the House of Commons. That is designed to be a counterweight to government. And very often they're there to challenge and to correct and to question ministers. And I think that's what they're doing. So all power to their elbow. The dialogue must continue. And reference, I think this is the last point I'll make before we go into questions. Reference has been made to the fact we're going into recess. And I am desperately keen that there is no let up in what we're doing during the recess. So we've agreed that our next meeting of the APBG will be on Tuesday, the 4th of August. But with Zoom, wherever the members are, we can Zoom in and keep going. And then 2 weeks after that, we meet again. And then 2 weeks after that, we're back into the House of Commons sitting. We have to keep the pace up at all times, because I'm afraid governments of whatever colour, it is sometimes a technique, as we know, to use the recess to shelve things. Oh, well, we can't, because Parliament's not so. Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not prepared to let that be the rule at all. And I know that the other members of the APBG are in agreement with this, and I take huge encouragement from that. I think, finally, my last finally is, I think what can Excluded UK do, I think is exactly what's been referred to by you, Sonali, is to keep up the contact with individual MPs, get the meetings with them face to face. Don't worry about the recess, just do it, because MPs should be able to do these things during the recess. And the sheer weight of pressure through social media or emails or whatever actually is working. I've had MPs who I don't even know who they are. They're new ones who came in December saying, hey, you're Jamie. Gosh, poof, 3 million. They've just said to me, 3 million? Like that. And so it shows that it's working. And my final point is this, is although I chaired the first meeting, I'm desperately anxious that it's genuinely cross-party, and that's why Tracy Brabin is a joint chair with me. That's why William Wragg for the Conservatives is a joint chair, because if it's just me saying I'm the chair and everyone else is vice chair, that's not good enough. It's got to be broad-based across the parties. We take it in turn to chair, because only by being on an absolute genuine broad front can we win this one, and by God, we must win it. I'll leave my comments at that.
Thank you very much, Jamie, and I absolutely agree with that. I think it's really important that it is a cross-party effort, and I think fundamentally the fact that you've got that much support says that this is not only unfair but it's morally unjust. So I think it's important that we all keep up the pressure during this time. So I'm going to have a look at some questions. So we've got one here from Rebecca. Thank you to everybody who's been involved in this, but also the campaigning. The question is, as the furlough scheme is changing next month, those that were left out, could they get something just to help them out till work picks up again, which includes theatre freelancers who are at risk of losing work while theatres are still closed? I mean, that is the point, really, isn't it? That we mustn't forget, whilst the the furlough scheme being wound down is hugely problematic anyway in our sector, given that as you know, theatres are still not open and are not likely to be open for some time. So actually, for them to start to contribute to furlough is really incredibly difficult at this time, and we're currently dealing with lots of people being laid off and lots of redundancies because there isn't a time scale for a real return to theatre. So yeah, but the important thing is, as this, I guess the point that Rebecca's making, as the schemes are wound down, it would be really good to think about those people who have had nothing through this period of time. Okay, somebody's saying, what was your feeling when the Chancellor stated that the exclusions were a policy decision when questioned by the TSC? Do you want to answer that one, Sonali? What were your feelings about that?
I think huge disappointment. I think the difficulty that we have, those of us who are affected, is that we're just being faced with the same stock responses repeatedly, and it's these repeated assertions that we simply will not accept. It's not about fraud, it's not about complexity, it's not because we haven't got the help we want, that in the way that we would have liked, etc. That is not what the issue is, and we really want to try and move the discussions on from that. Saying that it was a policy decision, there's no rationale behind that. We don't see what the rationale is. We don't see any justifications. The reasonings that are being put forward, they're simply unacceptable as far as we see it. And we really want to see or hear real answers, but also we need the support. Ultimately, we need the real answers to lead to the support that we all should have got. Like I said before, it's about parity. The schemes have created these huge disparities, and it does seem like reasons are just being put forward in order to glance over it and move on. And I think a lot of people sort of feel that over recess, maybe the Chancellor, the government feel that we'll just have to move on because we'll have no other choice. But as we keep saying, we're not going away. So yeah.
Thanks, Sonali. And somebody has said here, which I think is a really important issue, and I think we've all heard and seen this. How do we stop the rhetoric that those excluded are dishonest, tax dodgers, greedy company directors, deadweights, etc.? It seems that one of the biggest issues is public perception being against us. Don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Jamie?
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Well, I mean, it is nonsense, isn't it? And that's really why we've got to get the meeting with the Chancellor. I mean, I would hope to be at that meeting as when it comes. I want to say to him, on what grounds do you suggest that some people are scrounging? You know, can you just give us the facts out on the table? And if there's a problem, which I don't think there is, but if there is, then okay, we'll bracket around that bit, but that doesn't mean you exclude everybody else for one element if it exists at all. I want to make two other points, which are basic truths, is that the reason the government has been able to raise the billions, which is through public sector borrowing, and throw it in the directions they have so far, is because they can borrow, okay? And that's because the credit rating of the government is good. So money's not the problem. In the same way, and I've said this before at other meetings, is that Roosevelt, with his New Deal, just got a whole heap of borrowing and chucked it to the US and kickstarted the economy. The second thing is that the money that we hope to get, you chuck it at the people who have been excluded, but that money itself is then recycled into the economy by all of you going out there and doing your shopping and feeding your kids and all that. And that in turn boosts the economy via, in this case, the creative industries. So it's absolutely doable. And one other thing is that, of course, it's a point that Tim Farron made yesterday, which is that, of course, any sort of small business, self-employed, whatever, this is the seed corn that actually greater businesses can grow in the UK. These are the little acorns from which mighty oaks can grow. And if you neglect them, and if a Conservative government is seriously going to say we're going to neglect them, well, that surely is contrary to everything they're saying about being the party of business. That needs to be pointed out in no uncertain terms.
Yeah,
if I can just add, sorry, if I can just add to that, I think Bill Esterson made a really important point at the APPG meeting yesterday as well, that it's also a question of the cost of not supporting. By not supporting, where does that leave the economy? We all want to contribute to the future economic recovery and growth, but without the support that's needed now, that's presenting a massive obstacle. And I think that's really important, what Bill mentioned in the meeting yesterday about the support is needed now for future growth.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think, you know, all of us, particularly in the Creative Industries Federation, BFI, you know, lots of organisations were saying, you know, this is just really paying forward. This is not, you know, this is not throwing money away. This is investing in the creative industries, which contributes so much to the UK economy that it would be foolish not to do it. So it is, as you say, absolute nonsense that you know, businesses aren't being invested in. Skills, actually, yeah.
But Rebecca's point is a good one about the furlough, because anyone in the Treasury who thinks, okie dokie, we've done these things, now time's running, we start to wind them up. Well, that is really kind of missing the point, which is exactly what Excluded is all about. There's a lot more to be done.
Exactly. Somebody here, more of a statement than a question. I am furious that Rishi Sunak thinks that those of us that earn over 50k actually earn 200k. His assumption that TV workers earn like a city banker are so out of line with reality. I was just over the limit, yet have paid tax for nearly 30 years. The lack of parity is obscene. I think you're preaching to the converted, but I absolutely. And again, it's very frustrating. We felt frustrated that you know, the DCMS, who should understand the industries that they support, didn't seem to be able to put across very well to the Treasury the sort of patterns of engagement and employment in the industry. And I think that's been a huge part of the problem, that actually there were just patterns of engagement that the Treasury, you know, hadn't got their heads around at all. Okay, next question. What faith do Jamie and Tracy have in the Conservative members of the APPG to remain with it and back it when it comes to the crunch? I'll have to let you speak for Tracy too, Jamie.
Well, it's a point I've made, is that the APPG wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the Conservatives having signed up to it. And that is why our job as joint chairs is to try and sail this, what has not grown from a small coastal steamer to a supertanker through some quite choppy seas. What faith do I have they'll stick with it? Well, I think that there's still, in all politicians of all colours who are good politicians, that there's a sense of fairness and unfairness. And I don't want to get all sort of, you know, to us to break into land of hope and glory, but I do think it's a slightly British part of our nature, is that we do think, oh, hang on. That's actually why the poll tax collapsed in a heap, because all sorts of people, including lots of Conservatives, said, well, hang on, this isn't right. You know, how come the person living in the little house in the village is playing with the same as the lord of the manor? That's not right. So I'm optimistic we can do it and keep them on board. But I'll tell you this much. I and Tracy too will do everything in our power to keep them with us, because I know that this has been noted by the government, the fact that so many Conservatives, including 1 or 2 junior ministers, have signed up to the APPG. And when you've got that, I've got to be careful about my language, I don't want to annoy people, but you've sort of got a 5th column within the Conservative Party, which could prove to be incredibly useful. If you wonder why I'm being all Mr. Nice Guy, it's to keep them on board. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah, exactly. So somebody's also saying, I think the real problem is that people, Parliament, the Treasury, even HMRC, as well as the public, do not get how we make films and TV, etc. And more importantly, how we are paid for doing them. Yeah, I think I've just touched on this point a little bit. Nobody seems to realise that we work at Leavesden, Pinewood, Shepperton, not for those studios, that for most part we are forced to be PAYE for some archaic, nonsensical reasons. When I speak to ordinary people, they are so confused when I say I work on multiple productions a year, but I'm not self-employed, that despite being PAYE, I have, and others I know, to do a tax return each year. Bonkers. Agree. Have BECTU properly explained to government how weirdly we have to work? Yeah, I mean, we certainly have, or we've certainly tried to explain to government and over and over again during this period. But I think you're right. I think there are lots of officials and parts of government that don't understand that, which is in large part why we've been talking about a new deal for freelancers, so that we you know, don't get ourselves in a position in the future where this happens again to anyone, and then actually we do have a proper understanding and proper safety net for people who work under those arrangements. Is the current Chancellor being illegal in positively discriminating against over 3 million people? I mean, you all know the legal terms in relation to discrimination. So it's probably not. I mean, it feels like discrimination. I'm sure it's not. It's probably not legally discrimination, but what it is, as we've said, unfair and immoral. I think we would all agree to that. Are BECTU and Equity working in tandem? Yes, we are. We've done a lot of campaigning together through the Federation of Entertainment Unions. I think some of our members have slightly different arrangements. So, but yes, they've got lots of freelancers equally who have been without support. And so we have worked together. One for Sonali here. I'm a TV location coordinator working exclusively for Japanese TV production companies. I lived in Japan for nearly 9 years and speak the language. I'm a one-man band, officially a limited company paying taxes by self-assessment, paid officially by dividends, so have received no support. I've written to the previous Shadow Chancellor, the present one, the Chancellor himself, and also my own MP, Sir Gary Streeter. He has been extremely supportive and has been lobbying on behalf of us people who have fallen through the cracks. I suggest enlisting his aid in your admirable lobbying campaign if you haven't approached him already. Thanks a lot for all you're doing on our behalf. Do you know if he's involved, Gary Streeter, in your campaign, Sonali?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if you know, Jamie.
No, I don't. Sorry.
Actually, I might even be able to
We might
see that right now.
We may have to come back to you.
I don't see his name on the list, but we'll try to get contact with him. That's good to know.
Yeah, I just noticed in the chat a couple of people have also said, you know, this is great. It's great to hear about all the work that you're doing, but what can we practically do going forward? Because I guess a lot of people feel like this. We've done standard letters to MPs, and lots of people have written individual letters to MPs, and obviously your group is doing amazing work on the lobbying front. We continue to support lobbying, and in every press interview, every radio interview, every letter that we write to government, we always remind them about people who've been excluded. But is there anything else, or can I just throw that out there that perhaps Jamie and Sonali might want to think about how else you know, the unions in the creative industries can help?
Philippa, could I take you up on that one?
Yeah.
Going back to lockdown, it was kind of almost one of my starting points, really, was the creative industries are so much part of the weave, the fabric of Britain. And during lockdown, what was being done, we saw on our screens, or we saw online or whatever, that was creative, was all about cheering the nation up. And you know, and if we could almost have a flanking move to say, get groups of people who enjoy particular productions or have seen the work of somebody who's done a particularly snappy little film about something local, and say, this was fantastic, this has enriched our local society here, whatever. Because I think some MPs, when they're in the House of Commons, they think about affairs of state and stuff like that. And sometimes they forget what it's like just to have an ordinary working life, where when you're not actually working, something that enriches your life or enriches your kid's life or gets them up to do a bit of dance or whatever, that is really important. And I think that we lose that at our extreme peril. Do we really want to end up like North Korea? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So if we can just think of ways to getting people to write in, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
About a local production or a local whatever, and so on, and go that way, just a thought.
Yeah, or even to highlight things that we know have happened, and remind people that lots of people who've worked on things have been in dire straits during this period. I think that's a good idea. Somebody's saying, my sister works in an arts centre on 0 hours contracts. While the permanent staff have been furloughed, the casual 0 hours contract staff haven't been and have received nothing. The full-time staff have now been brought back, but not the contract staff, so have received nothing since lockdown. what advice would you give them? It seems grossly unfair, but is it legal? I mean, it is grossly unfair. Yes, it is incredibly. I mean, we had some success in theatres to get them to furlough even casual staff as well as permanent staff, but obviously we've just really probably delayed the crisis, because it's coming up now once the theatres have to contribute to the furlough situation. But yeah, it has, as far as casuals have been concerned, it has in large part been about whether or not employers have been prepared to furlough them, and lots of we've had to have lots of arguments about that, unfortunately. Ken is saying, I keep lobbying my MP and he's stopped answering my questions and proposed solutions. Yeah, I think there's a bit of that going on as well. In one email he said, I am a parliamentary private secretary to the Treasury and I'm bound by the ministerial code. Is there anything I can do to try and engage him?
Can I come in on that?
Yeah, please do.
It's a bit like the answer that we got yesterday from Esther, which was quite good advice, which is any MP can say, I've got this official job. But at the end of the day, the MP is the MP, and the MP has to look after constituents. And that constituent has an absolute right to see the MP face to face at a clinic or a surgery. And the MP is duty bound to take up that constituent's problem. And anyone who says I can't because I'm a minister, well, that I would say is contrary to any code of behaviour as for a constituency MP. Okay, I'm very clear about that.
Thank you, Jamie. That is clear. Also in the chat, I'm just going to mention this because I've noticed a few people have said thank you to Excluded UK. They've literally been a lifeline during this period, and lots of thanks to all the other groups as well who have been brilliant in their lobbying during this period. So we've got another one. The current PM says conferences can start again in October, but subject to etc, etc. He has no idea that the majority of large conferences take at least a year to set up. So in my case, all my work was cancelled from the 5th of March through to January 2021. Limited companies, all I've had is a small furlough payment, not enough to live on, let alone pay my corporation tax in October. Will we get a proper payment deferral rather than a small postponement with interest to pay? Don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jamie?
It's worth looking at. I mean, one of the things that was, I can't quite, maybe somebody can remember which MP it was, in our first meeting 2 weeks yesterday, the point was made that we as an APPG should try and work up solutions off our own bat as well to put them on the table to the Chancellor. So maybe there's a job of work we can do there. But at the same time, to do this, we have to work really closely with everything Excluded. So, yeah, doors open. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers at this stage. I can see what the problems are.
Yeah.
And the point raised about the sort of lead-in time towards working on events of this nature. I mean, I think that's something that we've heard a lot about from people working in various sectors of the creative industries. I myself, with my work, have been very much affected in that way. I was working on a project tied into the Olympics and was actually stuck in Japan for a while. 3 years of work and research went into that, and it's all hanging in the balance. And I can't set a date for it because I simply don't know how I can plan for it and then implement it working directly with cinemas and other partners. It's absolutely impossible to put any kind of time scale on that. And this is something that we're hearing quite a lot from people who work in live events, people who work in festivals. There's simply no knowing at what stage can we start to get into the process of thinking about getting back to work to plan for those kinds of events. So yeah, it's something that we're very aware of, and a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, indeed. Someone's saying here, I'm a PAYE freelancer. I've been told by my employer that it's because we are paid by the public funds, we wouldn't be furloughed. My question is, if the budget to pay me was given to my employer in the usual way, why was I not paid in the usual way? So I don't know if this might be a BBC freelancer, I suspect. left. So there have been particular issues around the BBC. Apparently they were told by government that they couldn't access the scheme, and that unfortunately the BBC has its own financial challenges at the moment. So we're currently in consultation with them about, you know, quite large numbers of redundancy. So it's a really difficult one, this, because I don't think they should have been told that. They should have been able to access the furlough schemes. It probably doesn't feel like it if you're on the receiving end. We did push the BBC to do as much as they could, and I think they probably did do as much as they could under very difficult circumstances. So, but yes, absolutely. To me, if the BBC should have been able to access the furlough scheme, I think that would have been the correct answer in that situation. Sylvia is saying, is there any possibility to engage more with all the rest of the people who have been receiving the help from government? Is that me whistling? I think there is more support from all these people to make a kind of moral pressure to the government and a kind of brotherhood amongst us all. I think this is not only the problem for the excluded, but also it's showing a lack of unity from the United Kingdom as a country. Solidarity is needed. Many thanks. I think that's a good point. I think certainly in BECTU, I think there has been quite a lot of support across, you know, from people who did get the support, for those who they know, who, you know, actually they just happen to be lucky. They just happen to be on a contract at the right time, or they just happen to be engaged in a way that meant that they got the support, whereas others didn't. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
I mean, it's something that we have very much in mind in terms of what we might be doing over the summer whilst lobbying might be a little quieter. We're thinking about ways in which we can try to engage those who are excluded, their families and friends, to broaden the awareness through other contexts, perhaps. It's difficult because we do hear from people quite a lot that they do feel isolated through perhaps lack of understanding, or being amongst a circle of friends where they're the only one who happens to be in that particular situation and excluded for whatever reason. I suppose that's one way in which we as a community that we formed sort of play a part in terms of trying to be a friendly and inclusive platform. But it is something that we're very aware of, and we're trying to formulate an initiative that we can put in place over the summer to think about ways in which we can broaden awareness by getting families and friends involved. So I think it's a very valid point.
Absolutely. Mark is saying here, and I think this is really, you know, the crux of how a lot of people feel. What hurts most is as a small limited company director, I am being called a tax cheat. I have 100% paid up national insurance account and I've paid all my tax since I was 16 years old, and I'm now 50 plus. I mean, that is, Sonali, you must feel that hurt too, I guess.
Yeah, very, very much so. I did an interview with BBC Business that was published online several months ago, right in the beginning of all of this. And afterwards, when they opened it up to the chat, I was horrified at the comments that came through. There were three of us who featured in that interview, and it really brought home what the public perception is out there, quite widely. And yes, it's very hurtful, and those are perceptions that we really want to try and break down. But it's difficult. There's no question, and that also feeds into the sense of isolation that people feel as well. So it is difficult, but yeah, we're trying to do what we can in small ways to break that perception down.
I mean,
Go on, Jamie. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, I get this too. And I don't think it helps one little bit that there is this sort of opinion abroad, because if we're trying to get rid of the them and us aspect of the UK, which has bedeviled this country for far too long, is not clever. And no names, no pack job, but I've heard some extremely well-off people saying, oh, they're just scroungers, you know. And you think, that's really charming. You know, do we still have people saying this sort of thing? You know, I'm going to shut up before I have to take my tablets.
So someone here, I think this is a really important point as well. Somebody anonymous is saying also it's not just the money aspect, the mental health turmoil it's caused will impact people for many years to come. And yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, you know, people have suffered a trauma, huge trauma, and it will take, you know, it'll take a long time to financially recover, but I think the mental health impacts will have been huge. And we already know in the creative industries that there's a higher than normal incidence of mental health problems, and this will not have helped at all. So it's really important, I think, through this campaign, but also into the future, that we really do tackle, you know, the impact that all of this has had on people's mental health. And just, you know, it's hard being a freelancer. It's hard not having, you know, secure employment at the best of times, but it's been, I think, probably, I'm sure Sonali would agree, quite devastating for many people during this particular period. That's a really important point to make.
I mean, if I can just add to that briefly, it's something that is very, very apparent to us from the conversations that we are having with people, what we're seeing in terms of the ways people that are talking about their stories. The mental health crisis that has emerged from this is present. It's not an impending crisis, it is present now. And to us, it's very apparent. And we're well aware that something does need to be addressed on this front as well, because I think there are multiple factors that are playing in, and mental health as such is already a factor in the broader sense of where we've ended up with COVID-19 and lockdown. You add this to the mix, and it's presented really, really difficult situations for people, harrowing stories. And we're hearing them at every APPG. We're hearing how the mental health aspect has become so present for people. And I think it's such an important point that that, you know, we keep in mind all the time and do whatever we can. But it's very, very difficult.
Can I just butt in, Sonali, too?
Yeah.
I think we all know that if you have a mental health problem or you're deeply stressed, there's no doubt that degrades the quality of the creative contribution you're making to society. People don't write as well, they don't paint as well, they don't act as well if they're totally stressed out. It's as simple as that. So if we want to keep British creative industry quality up there, then this is fun. People not having mental health problems is fundamental to that, in my view.
Yeah. I think
Philippa, I'm going to have to go in this.
Yeah. No, I was just going to wrap up actually.
No, well, can I just? Am I allowed one last hobby horse?
Please.
And then you can tell me to shove off.
No.
It's just a thought that occurred to me when Boris was announcing the money to build. Okay, this was capital expenditure, and he was sort of saying he was going to be like Roosevelt, although the money is a much smaller proportion of GDP compared to what Roosevelt did. The point is, if you're going to throw money at that, I would simply say, why doesn't the government throw a decent chunk of money at a creative project? Like, you know, let's make a film series about, I don't know, whatever you want to do with Britain. Something that could be really quality and last the test of time. And I think that they haven't thought about spending capital on the creative industry at all. They could commission works and so on, which could be then fed down to all of people who BECTU represent and so on. I'm going to go. Can I say thank you for your time?
Can we say thank you for yours? Then please stay in touch, and we'll make sure that we continue to work on this stuff during the over the summer.
I'm very happy to join you again, and I know Tracy is too. She's a proper actress. I'm just a ham actor, but there we go.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jamie.
Take care.
And June. So really, I just wanted to wrap up by thanking everybody, obviously, on the panel for their time. And also, I just was going to finish on the last question that's in front of me at the moment, which is about somebody who obviously feels quite isolated in that they don't know, you know, they live in an area, Solent, which is perceived to have minimal numbers of people working in the creative industries. Have you done any work, she's saying, have you done any work to map the country to show the numbers of freelancers in each area? And is there a local group, or have you thought about building local groups to get involved?
Yes, this is something that we're talking about. We know from the data that we've collected so far that those who are excluded are spread right across the country. There are people in every corner of the country, and MPs know this because they're hearing from constituents all around the country. And one thing that we are now looking at doing is possibly creating regional hubs where it can be a form of networking. It can also help with that sense of isolation as well. So it's definitely something that we have in mind, and we're working on and trying to see what can we formulate that can be meaningful and helpful for people across the country. I think there is actually one little group that formed out of the Excluded UK group already. A group of people just got together in one particular town and said, hey, we're all in the same place, let's talk more to each other. And they've set up their own little mini Excluded UK group, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of that in time. And the group is growing day by day. And of course, we know there are 3 million of us all around the country. So I think that is definitely something that's on the cards.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sonali. Thank you so much for your time. I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but everyone is just saying thank you so much. You've been a lifeline. You've been brilliant, and I absolutely endorse those thoughts too. Thank you everyone for listening. Just somebody asked the question about whether or not they'll be able to watch this again later or pass it on to people. Yeah, we will share the link of the recording. Sorry if we haven't managed to answer all of your questions during this period of time. Obviously, we'll be doing some more work, hopefully, with Sonali and Excluded UK, and we'll obviously talk some more about what sorts of things we could do together to support each other. And if any of you who are listening have got any ideas, then please feel free either to get in touch with Excluded UK, or if you're a BECTU member, get in touch with us. If you're not a BECTU member, then why not? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Sonali. Keep up the good work. You're brilliant, and I hope that eventually you get the justice you so deserve, and our members get the justice that they deserve. So thank you very much. I'm going to phone you in a minute.
Sure. Thank you.
Everyone.